please tell me, how satisfying was it for someone who was in law enforcement, was involved with the movement towards legalization of the plant medicine cannabis, and saw opening day for adult use in Ohio over the last 24 hours? There must be a lot of satisfaction for the hard work you've put in.
Um, I was overthrilled. It was something I never thought that I would see in my lifetime, much less be a vital part of it, as I have been for the last 9, 10 years at our state house, and then throughout the cannabis community in Ohio and many other states where I've testified before general assemblies as well. I got to give a shout out, a true shout out to who made this happen. The people of Ohio made this happen. The advocates, the activists across the state, those people that the people, citizens, the advocates and activists that went to the state house. I give kudos to the industry leaders as well, meaning, the license holders and what they did, having the money to influence to get it onto the ballot and to, getting people to vote and so forth. I get, the people that created this language, it didn't happen overnight. The organization has had I think 4 different attempts, and they finally succeeded, and they finally got the support at the polls. Is it perfect? It's far from perfect, but I don't know of any legislation that's ever been created that was perfect. And this is something that Ohio will work on. We will make it better. I don't think the expectations that we were hoping were met. It was far from when we opened the doors the first day for medical. We literally had lines that you had to wait 2 to 3 hours in. We had hundreds of people in line for our medical program. And this went on for a few weeks, if not a few months, every day at the dispensaries. Now, granted, I understand that, there were only around 50 some dispensaries open then, versus yesterday, we had close to 100 dispensaries opened up.
Mhm.
But we also have to understand that medical was limited to so many patients. Adult choice is an open market. 12 million people, whoever wants to participate, that's 21 and over. And I don't know how many 21 and over we have in Ohio. I'm sure half of the states over 21. So if we're looking at a 5 or 6 million patient base, 20 people in line to me is an average day at a dispensary in Ohio, for medical patients being in line.
Right.
So I'd be curious for one figure, and that is exactly how much money, how much revenue was generated yesterday for adult sales only. Because remember now, we're doing both adult and medical sales. And then the other figure I'd like to add to that is how much money Ohio spent in Michigan yesterday. So there's a comparison. But we could add Pennsylvania in too, and New York, because a lot of the Northeast people of Ohio go to Pennsylvania or they go to Michigan.
I'm shocked to hear that there's interstate commerce going on in the cannabis industry.
Wow.
I'm
Yeah, they
shocked.
tell us it's illegal. Like we didn't know that for the last 50 years, It didn't
Oh
stop
my
us
goodness.
then. It's not going to stop us now.
But Tim, the word that comes up a lot when I talk to people in this industry is fascinating, because there's so many fascinating elements to human behavior. And human behavior now is reflected not only in $1 billion market, but in science, in research, in sociology. I mean, it touches every part of our world in many, many ways. And I don't know what the future is going to be, but I must say that the hard work that people like you have put in is finally paying off, even though I think most in the industry want it to be more equally distributed. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, yeah. I think we do want more of a equally distributed industry as a whole. The cannabis community does. And as I think I've told you before, the cannabis community is, the consumers, the patients, and the industry are the license holders. In Ohio, we seem to have a clash. And some of it's good, a lot of it's negative, because Ohio has a $4 to $5 billion illicit market. We know that. Those come from law enforcement. And it's been like, figures, I've known those figures for 25, 30 years. And those are, arbitrary, guesstimated figures or whatever, but it's through the work that law enforcement, does, all agencies and so forth. We look at we're legalizing it now. Last year in 23, we did $480 million in Ohio, and we jump for joy, like, wow, that's what we did in our medical. Think what we're going to do in our adult. Well, what we did in our adult last year was $700 million in Michigan. That's what we did. So if we put those two together, we're at 1.2 billion dollars right there. Now, my question to the industry leaders, the industry license holders, is how are you going to tap into that $4 to $5 billion market? Well, it's not through degrading the illicit market, the legend market, or whatever, the black market, whatever you want to call it. You don't put out false rumors about cannabis on the street is tainted with fentanyl and other drugs. It's killing people. It's not good for you and all that. Show me the proof. If you're going to make these allegations, show me the proof. The ironic thing about that is this last month in Ohio's program, we had 3 recalls. Right. I can say for 48 years in the cannabis industry, I've seen 1 recall on the illicit market. 1 recall where somebody actually, dude, the weed's no good. We got rid of it. Is what it is. But I look at this, these people that make these comments, it's like, if that's your marketing tactic to get people to come to you to purchase, it's not going to work. It's turning people away, is what it's doing. Your prices are too high as it is, which, that's a whole other story. There is no need for, your market is established. The only thing changing in Ohio is we have new customers coming in the door. There's no reason to go from $180 an ounce to $500 an ounce for the exact same product, other than cannabis robbery.
Right.
Is what we're looking at.
Like,
and I hope they figure that out and get down. But yeah, I think we need equality and respect in the industry as a whole.
As a law enforcement, former law enforcement person, and the misguided information about driving under the influence of controlled substances. And I say that because I do want to include the Western medicine prescribed drugs that are out there. I'm talking about the opioids. I'm talking about those products that are controlled but legal, and certainly not federally illegal like cannabis still is. Does the medicinal impact of the plant allow you to operate a vehicle responsibly, as long as you are consuming it responsibly and know your limits, similar to alcohol?
No, it doesn't. There are still testing methods of cannabis for impaired driving. The problem is they're not science-based. That's the issue with it. And I watched several articles yesterday, news articles and so forth, and I truly wanted to reach out to the journalists and say, you should share the other side from someone who's not afraid to share the truth. Impaired driving, it's something that I don't want to see. I don't care what kind of impaired driving it is. I don't want my family, anybody else's family, ever to have to go through an incident of an impaired driver because of alcohol or a drug, a substance of abuse, whatever we want to call it. Aside from, we know that driver inattention is probably the #1 cause as far as accidents and fatalities, but in reality, but we don't promote that. What we look at is impaired driving in cannabis at this point in time. It's all at arbitrary figures as far as what they come up. Now, our bodies metabolize cannabis different than it does pharmaceutical drugs and alcohol. So we maintain expired metabolites in our system for a very long time. Some cases I've heard as high as 90 days. So what we're looking at now in Ohio, and Michigan has been doing it, is roadside test. Law enforcement does it, but there is no cannabis roadside test. That's legitimate, that's science-based, that you can do to touch your nose, watch my finger, put your feet in front. That applies to, and it was based off of the sciences of pharmaceutical drugs and alcohol. Those are true figures. They are based on science. They're effective. They work. With cannabis, you can't do that. You can get a urinalysis test. You can get a blood test from me for cannabis, and you're probably going to find it, especially if I'm a patient. But what is a fair, what do they do it for nanograms per milliliter of urine or blood or whatever? What is a fair science-based number that says you're impaired, you shouldn't be driving you need to be convicted. There isn't one. Now, can we on the roadside? And it's a company out of Michigan that actually invented. It's a roadside test where we can do a swab now of saliva, and we actually have a bill at the State House addressing this now because it was challenged and said, "Wait a minute, you're withdrawing a substance from a body without a search warrant." So that was challenged right away. So now at the State House, of course, we have a retired law enforcement officer, and she wants to make a name for herself. So she's introduced that no, you have to give a roadside swab for cannabis testing. Well, what that roadside swab does is it indicates that hopefully within in the last 3 to 4 hours, you have actively consumed cannabis. So we're getting a swab of that. It doesn't say you're impaired. It doesn't say that you can't drive. It doesn't, it just says there is a presence of cannabis in your saliva in your mouth. Okay, I got it. So if I drop a gummy, I'm just kind of curious. That's my question to him. If I drop a gummy, it goes right down the throat. Does it come back into my saliva? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. It may or may not. But that test is to say, okay, yeah, you are under the influence of cannabis, but it doesn't say that you're impaired by science in cannabis. So we have another bill at the State House where we were actually trying to, and I worked with the senator on this, and I was grateful that he brought it up. And he actually used to be a prosecutor, but he brought it up. So what we need to do in Ohio is we need to change from that metabolite testing to an active THC test. That actually, when we do that roadside swab, we come up with, so many, there's a presence in there. So how many nanograms, again, per milliliter, whatever it is, there is declared to be impaired, which means you're susceptible to arrest, conviction, and so forth.
Right.
Well, we started off, when he started off, the bill was at 25 nanograms. And I said, oh, time out, wait a minute. All you got to do is read the label on the cannabis package and you got 25 nanograms in you. Okay, so no, that's not true. So if you're a cannabis patient in Ohio, you cannot drive because everybody's running around with 50, 100, 150, 200 nanograms, in their system. If you're a heavy user, if you're a small user, you've got 50 to 100 in you at all times. If you're daily or every other day, a heavy user, some of these hardcore guys and girls out there, they're pushing 150, 200 plus nano might pop up and and they could totally function perfectly. Because we have to look at body mass, body size, the consumption, the time frames, and all that. And we just don't have that in law enforcement. And I don't foresee it coming in the future. It's an issue that we are looking at. And as I said, I'm all about getting the impaired driver, from the stuff that I've seen on the roadways and so forth. I'm just all about, getting impaired driving. I know it's not a reality, but it's something that we can address the same as we driver in detention with cell phones and laptops in the cars, eating a cheeseburger, putting on your makeup, all that stuff, it all needs to be addressed. So people just need to understand when you get in a motor vehicle, there's a potential out on the roadway that you could take somebody's life,
Right.
Even if you're not impaired. And if we look at the statistics, I'm sure you're going to find out that you'll find more non-impaired accident fatalities than you will find impaired accident fatalities.
Right.
So
Well,
I'll kind of leave it like that and let the experts hash it out a little bit.
every human deals with this differently, and that's the biggest challenge. And I keep going back to, and then we're going to talk about this. Does punishment work? Or education, or is education more important than punishment? When you become a human and you do something stupid or wrong or cause an injury, does punishment work?
Punishment is education. Punishment will work for some, for others they don't. Some enjoy punishment, some don't enjoy punishment. Technically, when we look at incarceration, you send somebody to jail for OVI for 6 months and they come out and they now know how to pick a lock or they know how to hack a computer or, our incarceration facilities are low-level colleges. You just don't get a certificate or a degree. And hopefully the idea is when somebody is punished, I guess you call it scared straight for whatever, that phrase that was around a long time ago. It works on the majority of people that, they're like, I don't never want to do this again. Whatever they may have done. They may have robbed a store, they may have stole something, an auto, whatever. They're like, I'm not doing this again. That punishment was enough for me. That was my education to not do it anymore. But for others, they thrive on that. The repeat offenders, they just thrive on defying societal rule, and they crave sometimes being incarcerated so they can learn we'll say learn a new gig, something else to do. You go from a stealing at Walmart, and now all of a sudden you're robbing banks because you went to jail for 12 months for theft. And now you've graduated, and now you're a senior in criminology, and you're robbing banks instead of stealing from Walmart. So yeah, it does happen. But I think punishment does help. Educational awareness is a key to a lot of things. But as I said, from my experience and what I've seen in my career field and so forth, is that punishment is definitely education. As a field trainer, I used to tell my officers all the time, my new recruits, that coming to work as a law enforcement officer, the easiest thing you can do is arrest somebody. You can do that all day long. Based on our laws that we have, you can literally go out and make traffic stops or walk down the street or just sit somewhere, and you can arrest people and take them to jail all day long. One thing I want you to do every day is to have an incident where you don't have to arrest somebody. You don't have to charge them because it's your discretion. But can you educate them? And can you teach them the punishment's not worth what you're doing? There are better things in life for you to do, et cetera, and give them talk to the people. That was one of the number one things I focused on, and I really truly believe that it got through to a lot of the new recruits, that I dealt with and so forth. Instead of the attitude as my field training officer, as soon as we started, the first thing I got was punched in the chest, saying, we're going to go out and clean up the neighborhood. There'll be no more drugs here by the time we're done training you. Well, after he punched me in the chest, I was about, he was a younger kid, and I was like, oh, dude, you know, don't touch me again. And so it was the thing. But, the whole thing, 25, 30 years later, guess what? There's still drugs in that neighborhood. He didn't cure the world, of drugs and so forth. And it was just this whole mentality of profiling and labeling and certain cultures and so forth. That's where to me, that was disgusting. I was just glad that I was old and mature enough to realize that this kid that was what was he, 15 years younger than me, I believe, it was my field training officer. I was at least old enough at the time to realize that sorry, you're full of shit, just get me through training so I can go out and do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And
well, do your job and do your job, which is to uphold the law. And it's the laws that have, take time to change, and they have now. Our last question I want to ask you is about, if you were in charge of prison reform in this country, what would be the one thing you would do?
Make the prisoners happy for one thing, or make those incarcerated. No, I would start I think with educational programs for rehabilitation programs within the facility, rather than waiting until they get out and hoping that they attend some. Because when you have them incarcerated, you can almost force them to go and set in classes. You can kind of force them to be educated to some level that you want them to be educated on, versus cutting them loose into society where they say, okay, well, once a month you got to show up for this class or whatever. I would work on that, and as well as the cleanliness of the facilities.
Really? Wow.
They're disgusting. I just say it. And I got to share this with you. Everybody in Ohio, all these, like yesterday, all these new people, well, they're not new. Let's clarify one thing. Legalization in Ohio does not mean more people will start consuming cannabis. It only means that if you're 21 or over, you can go into the dispensary and buy it legally now. But the people of the bill, the makers of the bill, and these license holders think that people that don't use cannabis are all of a sudden going to start using cannabis because it's legal. Well, it's not legal. It doesn't protect your job. It doesn't protect your firearm. It doesn't protect your driving. It doesn't protect your child custody. It doesn't protect your bank loans. It doesn't protect your housing. All of that stuff needs to be worked on. So as I've said before, I think a lot of people yesterday in Ohio, when they were going to these facilities, they were expecting to walk into this showroom of jars and bags of cannabis hanging and sitting on the walls everywhere and stuff. Quite frankly, my opinion, when you walk into a facility in Ohio, it's like walking into a slating center in a county jail. You know, there's so many, it's just all the security systems, the walls, the doors, and all this, and the vaults and everything. And some of them, they have pretty packages, but there's no product out. So you're walking in and you're blindly buying a package off of a monitor and walking out the door. And once you walk out, it's yours. Once it's paid for, it's yours. So I think a lot of them probably figured out yesterday that, wait a minute, even Jimmy on the corner lets me look at my sack of weed before I buy it, you know? So unfortunately, yeah, that's part of the program in Ohio.
Yeah.
Unlike a lot of the states where you can actually see the stuff. So I kind of get a giggle yesterday out of some of the media cuts where they show these big jars of buds and they're picking out flowers and putting them in the bag, clear plastic bag and like this. And I go, that's not an Ohio dispensary. You're a journalist. Walk up to the damn door, knock on it, walk inside and get some coverage. They'll let you do that. Show it what it really looks like. You know, some of them are attractive. They really are. They look nice. They got pretty paint and pictures on the wall and so forth. But I think it was, for some, it was kind of disappointing as far as for yesterday, what the expectation of it was. Probably more disappointing at the POS when they actually had to hand over their cash or debit cards. So I do wish Ohio, as much as I put into it. I wish it all the best. I'll continue doing what I can as far as the criminal justice reform and making the program a safe program for everyone.
Massachusetts, gone through it. Had my medical cards in 2013, 2016, the ballot question, 2018, first adult use sale in November. 6 years later, there's still some challenges about what you just described, which is access to the product, to smell, to make a choice, an educated choice, if you will. And you described how the regulations, especially in the beginning, are so strict, it's difficult to do that. That being said, the more education, the more exposure, the more normalization about this plant will be the thing that drives acceptance and understanding that you could compare it to whatever you want to compare it to. But it's a plant medicine is different than any drug that has been part of our society for at least the 80, 100 years that it's been prohibited. You know, before that, you know, doctors.
Tens of thousands of years.
Right. But I mean, I love this stat. And I learned this from a guy who did the history of cannabis. And I said, so let me ask you a question. If you got seen by a doctor from NYU Med, Harvard Med, or Yale Med, those are and UPenn Med are the oldest medical facilities, teaching facilities in our country. And they prescribed you a medicine, you would take it, right? Because you trust their educational that they had. Well, doctors that graduated from those med schools wrote over 5 million prescriptions for cannabis between 1900 and 1906. So let's talk now about what impact getting it out of our society has had on the incidence of cancer, of epilepsy, of Crohn's disease, of other things that now we've recognized, you know, this plant actually helps improve the lives of people with chronic pain or whatever it is. It softens the prohibitionist stance immediately, because now I said, look, I'm addicted to drugs. I have 90-day supplies of like 7 different things that my doctors have prescribed for me. What a shock. High blood pressure, high cholesterol. I mean, again, we accept that because it's been part of where we are. But now it's a new world. Now we're learning through science and research. And Tim, you know this. They're just starting to learn about this plant. How many new cannabinoids have they discovered since like 10 years ago? I mean, it's incredible to me. And of course, we're all focused, we all in the industry, consumers, businesses, on percentages of THC. And it just doesn't work like alcohol's percentages. It just doesn't. Every
Right.
human is different. What works for me is not going to work for you. Yeah, it's why the American Nurses Association preaches start low and go slow.
Yep.
You're going to learn that the titration method, how you take it into your body, whether it's through your lungs or through your edibles or through sublingual, or even the capsule, it is different every
Right.
time because every person is different. Every mammal that has an endocannabinoid system it's going to impact it differently. It's very challenging to make one size fits all, which is
Right.
why Big Pharma, I think, has been resisting it because they know you can't measure 5 milligrams is the measurement, maximum measurement per dose in beverages, in edibles. And yet people are still figuring out ways to consume 100. I mean, I'm amazed that there are as many functioning, I'll use the term waker and bakers out there. It's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, the medical history of cannabis is very fascinating. As you can see on the wall here, two places behind me.
Yep.
If you look at those bottles real close and some of the prescriptions, not a recommendation, but actual prescription from the 1800s and early 1900s, the larger bottles there, the stuff behind that is all prescriptions into that photo that's there. Some of the names on here are Eli Lilly, Merck Sharp, all these pharmaceutical companies that still exist today and actually played a big part in the 1937 decision. But when we look at the medical history, the criminal history of cannabis is a whole other thing. But when you look at the medical history of it, and we go back to, say, 1850 pharmacopoeia to 1942, and cannabis is one of the top 3 medications used in the US and in other parts of the world. Totally acceptable, very effective in what they use it for. We have a 1914 Narcotics Act that totally left cannabis out because it wasn't a narcotic. It wasn't harmful. It wasn't killing people. There wasn't an issue. So we come into, the 1930s and we've got these, hungry politicians and the hungry millionaires and billionaires at the time and the Rothschilds, the DuPonts and Anslinger and all them. We don't want to lose the contracts we have coming with these, Eli Lilly and these guys as far as medication because they haven't learned how to totally control and package it or whatever, or to make the different, forms of intake and so forth. And plus they've got wood, lumber yards and stuff. They don't want to lose the milling and so forth for hemp. And so on. So that thus created the 1937 Tax Stamp Act.
Did you mention Anslinger? I learned something. I thought I knew a lot of stuff. You know quite a bit as well. In fact, far more than I do in a lot of ways. But I learned something from a guy I talked to on one of these Zoom calls. And I was shocked. I wasn't shocked to hear it. I hadn't heard it before. But when I heard it, I went, oh my God, now this really makes even more sense to me why the white man with the money that controlled the economy after Wall Street crashed in 1929 wanted to vilify this plant. And it had to do with the fact that Harry Anslinger married Andrew Mellon's niece to get his job in 1930 under Herbert Hoover as the first federal narcotics bureau chief. And he held that job until 1962, feeding Americans misinformation based on race, trying to maintain the Jim Crow South, keep the money with the white man. I think you know what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 30s. I mean, it is so disgusting to me.
It is.
As an educated man who's, covered history and sociology. And I mean, I really thought I knew a lot about history until I started looking at the history of this plant and seeing the depth of systematic racism that's part of the story from the very beginning.
Very true. Yeah. This one plant bears more pejorative attitudes in America as a whole than, in my own opinion, has any other thing that you want to talk, any other topic you want to talk about. I mean, we've gone from, political scams to big business scams to racism, to a variety of things that continue to live on to this day. The thing that's astounding to me is we'll take, in 37, when they created this, they put cannabis and hemp in the same category and just we're all kind of call it one thing, marijuana, because that's what the Hispanics call it. This is America. Can we stick to cannabis? No, we want to further it. So we do that. Well, and one of our, one of their big things was, well, this is the drug that's the gateway drug. It's a theory. Well, 1944 LaGuardia report, a federal government study said it's not a gateway drug, but they still push it that it is. And then we come to 1968 and they, the whole 1937 tax day effect's found unconstitutional. In the meantime, we've got the AMA, American Medical Association, in 37 telling, government, don't do this to us. This is a valuable medicine. We're still learning from this plant. Where does medicine come from? From plants. Cannabis has a variety of methods of intake on this plant. We could do the same thing with other plants, create other, forms of intake rather than just a capsule or a pill or an inhaler or a syrup or whatever. We do that with other plants. We've just expanded with cannabis because the variety of it, and it's the most closest, as you said, to our ECS system in our own bodies. But when we look at that medical value, we get into 1968 until 1970, that 2 years, we had full legalization in America. Until Nixon comes along and says, okay, what can I do to, promote my image or whatever he was going for? Even the AMA and the I forget the committee of governors that went together, 5 of them, and came to him and says, look, we did research on this and everything. No, don't illegalize it. Just let's learn to study it. If we have to regulate it, we'll regulate whatever. But no, he goes against the AMA and he goes against this commission. The Schaefer Commission. He goes against the Schaefer Commission and other organizations and says, no, I'm going to do what I want to do. It's a Schedule 1. It has no medicinal values. How could it not have any medicinal values if it just took it out of the pharmacopoeia? Come on, dude. Wake up. Too bad there wasn't an assassin around at that time.
That's harsh.
What it is.
He did resign, and
yeah.
But I can't.
So we end up, we're at now with the mentality that has. That says, Nixon's like, go out predominantly and pick on these neighborhoods where they're close community and, there's buildings and stuff, do what you got to do. And here's an incentive for you. You get to keep the money and assets if you want. So now you have a second budget for your law enforcement department. And that's the mentality that we have now still to this day. And now some of that has changed. My issue with the whole thing is that we know all of this stuff was lies from the past. We know what the truth is on the streets. We know what the truth in the medical industry and so forth. And then, in the judicial system, but we still have those people. And I don't blame it on them other than the fact that you're an educated person now. Why do you continue to dumb yourself down? You know the truth, so let's face it. Let's go back real quick here and then I'll stop for a second. Is state trooper and deputy sheriff's hats in Ohio have always been made out of hemp. So why they got you pulled over on the side of the road, writing you a citation for that half a joint you have in your ashtray that could be hemp. It hadn't been tested. They're wearing hemp on their head. So how hypocritical is that? That was one of the things at the State House, and I had a lot of fun with it.
I bet you do. I bet you do. I bet you do.
Hey, see the troopers, they'd always ask, Johnson, hurry up and get our hats legal.
That's what? I think that's a.
Go ahead.
I love hearing factoids like that. Hey, Tim Johnson, you and I could talk to you for freaking hours, pal. Until our voices ran out. But I really appreciate it.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.